right, Laura, let's go. Make this smooth. This is professional stuff. Live.
It's been a while since I've done a live. It's been a while since I've done a live. Hello and welcome to the live pre-Christmas Huddle breakdown. I have been snapped into action by James. I've had enough of you Americans telling me what you think and what your thoughts are this week, James. But anyway, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to go here. I'm gonna practice sobriety because it's only 1 p.m. But ready for the festive period.
I would say 1 p.m.'s late enough, I would say. But that's just me. Martin, how are you doing?
Really good, actually. Just when you mentioned that about Americans, I should say my wife's from California, so I'm definitely getting lots of instruction at the moment to keep me right and get the house ready over the festive season. So, yes, all good. I'm getting kept in check.
She's clearly sold you a bill of goods. We don't even consider California America anymore. So,
just going to check these comments in a moment, James.
Listen. This is a Celtic podcast. What do you think? Should be involved politics or something? I don't know. But Alan, you're looking very festive. How are you?
Yeah, great. I'm aiming for the, Alan from accounts, the crushing bore all year round, but gets a bit funky at Christmas and absolutely proves the point. I think I've nailed it.
Yeah, you do look like one of the background characters from The Office, and it's exactly you've nailed the aesthetic, to put it that way. Thank you to everybody in the comments. I see Quinny's in here. Good to see you, Mick McKenny. I started this and I'm going to regret it because I can't read out all the names. But anyway, it's good to see everybody here. Merry Christmas to all of you when it comes. I hope you've been good little boys and girls. Otherwise, Santa will leave a lump of coal in your stocking if that's the way it goes. James, I'll come to you first. Obviously, Wilfried Nancy secured his first victory this weekend against the might of 10-man Aberdeen. I've got to say, this is very not like me, but I got a bit overexcited after the game. I really thoroughly enjoyed watching the number of chances that we created, regardless of the fact that we couldn't stick most of them away. What was your overall thoughts of the game on Sunday and kind of where it leaves us as far as the ongoing discussion around the new manager?
Well, the first thought was thank God, because if we'd have somehow figured out a way to draw that or heaven forbid lose it, I don't think I could have taken it. Just given the way things have unfolded and the degree with which the hysteria has transpired and I'll call it the unevenness of the performances. So there's plenty of ammo for people to be upset about, for people like me that are kind of defending what's going on, trying to explain through my way of analyzing things what I think's happening. There's plenty there to pull out. So it's like a hysteria / rationality thing. It's a big cauldron of mess. So to somehow not get the 3 points in that game would have been a travesty. And in a perverse way, a great summation of the last 2 weeks. So thank God it didn't happen in like a dark comedy kind of way. So yeah, big relief, more than kind of justified given how much we dominated, the number of chances, all of that kind of stuff. So and I agree with Nancy continually, which is meaning that since he's arrived, in this sense that there is progress and that there's incremental progress that's occurring. So I think that's also positive, granting that there's plenty of room still for anxiety and concern, and there's plenty of risks that we keep talking about. So yes, very positive, and thank God.
Alan, I think you and James, your enthusiasm for numbers and figures is rubbing off on me a little bit, because I found myself at halftime at Celtic Park when we were 1-0 up, checking FOTMob and finding we had an XG of over 3 and we'd only scored 1 goal. And I was trying to show the guy next to me who did not give a toss whatsoever. So are you proud of me?
FOTMob. Thank God for Freud, eh?
Yeah, indeed.
Isn't there a filter on that sort of thing on Celtic Park?
Yeah,
sort of
sorry.
parental settings.
That's the other website.
Yeah.
But what was your overall thoughts? The big conversation coming out of the game is the sheer number of chances that we created, and the things that tells us that's positive about the system that's been put in place, but also the glaring limitations of the squad that we have at hand. Obviously, where do you sit in that conversation, and what did it show you on Sunday to contribute to that?
Yeah, so just on that point, I mean, one of the themes of the season that we've got many themes this season, and the old variance conversation was again much in evidence there in this game. But we've also, rather more dryly for some, talked an awful lot about XG models and so forth. And having just watched the game back this afternoon, put the stat pack out on the site, there was an awful lot of chances, yes, but there was an awful lot of really bad chances, not good quality chances, interspersed with some excellent chances. So it wasn't a case of uniformly they were all good, they were all bad. There were some brilliant chances, and then there was a lot of really quite low XG sort of chances as well. That all sounds like I'm about to be really churlish, so I'll leave that there. That's more of the conversation about XG models and what they mean, and interpreting them on a single game basis, which, as we said, requires a lot of care. In terms of the actual performance itself and the outcome, I've been equally as optimistic that the way that Nancy sets up a team is right for Celtic and will allow Celtic, if it's implemented with good players, big if, to potentially, dominate the league to a large extent in a similar way to Ange Postecoglou's team. But my major reservation, and what I've picked up from what I've watched and listened to, is that, are the players bought into this? Are they actually going side by side with him on this journey? And that's been my major concern. Now, what I felt after watching that game was, once again, from a very strong position, they encountered, a very bad moment to go 1-1, 74 minutes. The stadium goes kind of quiet. I think they generally, stayed with the team, which is great to see. But there was definitely, frustration there, obviously, and I'm sure the players were frustrated and he was frustrated. And it was like, well, how are they going to respond to that? And they did keep going. And I think that is very encouraging. There's been an awful lot of chatter specifically about Callum McGregor and his, people speculating about his relationship with Nancy. When I see Callum McGregor in the 93rd minute sprinting from the middle of the park to overlap and get on the end of a pass across for that third goal, I'm not really worried at that point about his motivation, his mental state to give his all for Celtic. So I think that the word, again, I keep using is resilience. Nancy used it many times post-match, and that, seeing that resilience in the team to keep going, was the most pleasing thing. And then the second most pleasing thing, which we'll dive into, it was just the growing evidence of round pegs and round holes, which is another one of the themes that we've talked about endlessly. And I think there are some players who are actually flourishing, or look like they're going to be flourishing. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I think lots of positives, lots of context as well, which we'll get into, that we need to keep in mind before we get over ourselves.
Absolutely. Martin, you're keeping an eye on comments for us, and we'll get to a few of them in a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to get your thoughts as a fellow match goer. I've seen a lot of stuff flying about online, and you know me, I don't get involved in debates on Twitter. It's just not my style. But I've seen a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. I just drop it and go, see ya, bye. But Martin, what did you think of the atmosphere on Sunday? Because obviously there was an expectation that it was going to be a lower crowd than usual. Some people blaming it on the negative feeling around the manager. Others people obviously saying that's normal at this time of year, last Sunday before Christmas. People have other things to do. I felt it was a majority positive atmosphere. People seem to be wanting the manager to do well. And regardless of the conversations about whether he might or might not be the right man, when you're in the stadium, the crowd is encouraging the team, I feel.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Laura. I guess the big thing that came across to me was a very nervous atmosphere going into the game, because Aberdeen, despite losing Thursday night, they get heavy defeat over in Prague. They'd been in a pretty good run of form. They'd 7 games unbeaten, 1 defeat in the last 9. So going into it, it wasn't going to be a pushover given our form. I think everybody was really enjoying the way the game was going right up till the Aberdeen equaliser, and then the nerves really set. To be honest, my nerves started jangling anyway when I saw the Lev Yashin type save that was pulled off from a Callum McGregor shot. I thought, oh man alive, just the sheer amount of chances. We've seen this movie so many times, and I was waiting for a sucker punch. And to Alan's point about the resilience, that's my big takeaway, the way that so many players not only played well, but had the mental fortitude to come back, because I did worry about that given the second halves in the Dundee United game at Tannadice, and of course the League Cup final. But overall, very positive. People delighted for the manager. There was still, though, I felt a sizable amount of people coming away from the game saying, well, defensively, we still look weak. He plays too open defensively. And also there was a bit of, it was only Aberdeen. As I say, not a pushover. So I still think it's pretty mixed. I think that to the guy's point, he's not Martin O'Neill. He needs to really get a big victory. I would suggest, without going too far ahead of ourselves, going to Fir Park and getting a result against third place Motherwell would go a long way. And then, of course, we have the Forces of Darkness arriving in the East End the 3rd of January. And as we know, for Celtic managers, that can be very much make or break.
Absolutely. You've picked out a question from somebody. Do you want to read that out, and maybe the guys can give their thoughts on it when you're talking about defensive frailties?
Yeah, if I can find it now. This is all new to me as well, folks.
I've got it here if you want it. So
no, here we go. I think this is from Tom Dahl, 951106. Tom says, I still think Nancy is not putting enough emphasis on certain midfielders to be cover when one or more of the centre halves step forward.
What do we make of that, James?
Yeah, well, so this comes back to, I think, the those who looked at how he played at Columbus Crew, and I get why most people don't. I mean, people have limited amounts of time, or supporters, or not freaking analysts, that kind of thing. So that's why we try to carve out our little niche, because we do these sorts of things. So when I went back and I looked at how he actually played, it was fairly obvious he was going to do a couple of things pretty quickly. The question was how quick. He was going to move fullbacks into those wide center back positions, because that's how he played at Columbus Crew, and what he demands of those wide center backs in how dynamic they interchange in attack with the wing backs, that was going to happen, but that the two pivots, the two sitting midfielders, are of paramount in performances because of their need to rotate and to provide cover, so that when we do have 6 attacking the box, you have hopefully 4 in behind, and what usually happens is one of those 2 will go to join in or around the box, and one has to rotate to sit, and you end up with a kind of a 3-1 oftentimes. And even on the goal that Aberdeen scored, that was kind of a 3-1, the way that it occurred. Now, what I think people are uncomfortable with, understandably, because this is a new way of doing things. Most, even more dynamic, progressive, modern coaches aren't this demanding on the rotation part of it, which is when one of those center backs goes, or even Trusty in the middle goes at times, you'll see that there has to be that rotation to keep that kind of rest defense in a shape. So I think Tom's point is of paramount importance for this thing to work, even under the expectation that it is going to be a gun-slinging setup. That's how Ange's was too. There's going to be 1v1 defending, so this is a part of the system. People are just going to have to get over it. It's kind of like I've joked, consuming U.S. media on ESPN with Nichols and Craig Burley. Always, just every time they talk about Barcelona, they have to comment about how loose at the back they are and how high the line is and how they get caught in transition. And you'd thought Barcelona's been terrible for the last 18 months. I just think people don't like it because it's different. And that's even if it's effective, like it was the vast majority of the time, particularly domestically under Ange. So it comes with risks. There's all kinds of issues. And one of the big risks is these rotations. And that's part of the learning curve. And that double pivot in midfield, they have to be good at making those rotations for this thing to work.
Yeah, Alan, it's an interesting point that Tom, the viewer, brings up, and that James has mentioned there, because I have seen some of the analysis on Sports Scene, if you place any value on that, was suggestive that a major part of the reason for us conceding that goal against Aberdeen was that I think it was Liam Scales stepped up a little bit too early and left that hole that obviously somebody else didn't rotate into. James called it a gunslinging approach. Is it something that concerns you in terms of our vulnerability at the back, or is it going to be a situation like Ange where he sort of had the attitude of, if we score more than you, we win the game, basically?
Yeah, I mean, that was the trope, but in actuality, such was the ferocity and consistency of the attacking that it was quite rare that teams were able to break. And when they did they have the quality to take advantage of the situation? Now, you've got to give credit to Aberdeen for a terrific pass and I was going to say a terrific finish, but I'm wondering if Kasper Schmeichel will ever lift his left arm beyond here ever again. And I'm serious, actually. I don't even know if he can. So that's probably sidebar that one for later. But let's give the guy credit for the finish, because he actually hit it just outside of. And that's actually quite difficult to react to. It's almost easier for him if it's about a yard away from him. You hit it right next to him, but just past him. So listen, you got to give credit for that. But listen, of course, early days, that'll all come back to the perception that it's the defensive shape that's failing here. What I saw in the game were some really good examples of recovery. Now, this way of playing is very demanding, both physically and mentally. So we talked about the two midfield pivots, Engels and McGregor. So let's talk about the upside. Have you seen Callum McGregor get involved in so many goal-scoring opportunities ever in the last 5 years? I haven't, right, in any game. Because he was getting forward, he was breaking forward so often. We saw Engels again miss a header from inside the 6-yard box because he's breaking into the box. And the idea being that one goes, one stays. Now that's tricky because it's communication, it's timing, it's all of those things, decision making, etc. So that'll take a bit of time to work through. One of the players that I think is actually really made for this system is actually Yang on the right. I think if you take away from Yang the pressure of being a creative goal-scoring player, and actually his job is to use his engine and his work rate and his speed to get up and down that line and to be a good teammate and to be disciplined. If you notice when Celtic lose the ball, he's almost straight back to that right back position, and often it's a 4 because he gets back quicker than anyone else. And I think this suits him, and I think he has utility in this role because I think where he fails is in the final third. He makes bad decisions. He gets confused, he loses confidence. But I think almost as a sort of workhorse, if you like, on the right, keeping shape and being disciplined to get back, I think that suits him in his with his skill set. On the left-hand side, I think it's trickier because we've got more naturally attacking players, and that's maybe where we got caught. But what I saw was there were occasions when we lost the ball, and McGowan and Yang were killing themselves to get back. And actually, you talk about, the defence is loose. Well, we've got 5 defenders. How many defenders do you want? I mean, when does Celtic ever defend with 5 players, right? that is the out of possession shape. The out of possession shape, which you'll see across Europe, many teams playing, is 5-2-3. Okay, and what one thing that really impressed me at the weekend was on the left hand side, because again, another two players who found their sweet spot in this system are the two players on the left hand side, which were McCowan and Maeda. Now McCowan's not a wing back, but he was only a wing back out of possession. So out of possession, he filters back as essentially the left back. That might seem crazy, but what does that allow? It allows Maeda to be at the head of the press, which is exactly where you want him. You want him right up there, worrying the hell out of the defence, right? But when Celtic had the ball, McCowan would come inside, Maeda would go outside. And then Maeda would be playing the role that he's, familiar with, that he's played for Japan, that he scored 24 goals in the J-League, playing that sort of left-sided forward that makes diagonal runs all the time. And McCowan is in his 10 spot. And he's able to find these little half spaces, and he did that really, really well. Again, that's not easy. Where am I supposed to be? When do I go back? When do I go forward? When am I inside? When am I outside? That's going to take time. And McCowan probably isn't anybody's first choice as a regular starter, bless him, but he really is. Looks like he's loving this new role. He's really blossoming in the last few games in this role. So again, round peg, round hole. So in terms of defensive shape, I think there's a lot there to be, that I've seen that's encouraging. You made a comment, a little joke really about Trusty's hamstrings before we came on live. That would be one of my concerns. Because again, another player who's found his sweet spot, Austin Trusty in the middle, being the defender. He is the defender. He's got virtually no responsibility to, although he ended up with a lot of the ball again, but he was pretty good on it. He was okay. He was fine. He was functional. He wasn't Beckenbauer, but he was functional. And he's got this recovery speed. How many times did he bail Celtic out, blocking shots? He is the last-ditch defender. Now, I think he's got to do far too much work, and I think he's, as you say, his hamstrings must be stressed. But he's perfect for that role in a sense, or he's certainly the best that we've got for that role. I'm not saying he's perfect; none of our players are, but he's good for that role. He's a good fit. So, I think there's plenty to be encouraged about. But this is quite complicated in terms of switching from a sort of a kind of a nominal 3-4-3, which is never really a 3-4-3 until you're sort of kicking off, to then become more of a sort of 3-1, 5, but then out of possession it becomes a 5-2-3. So this is quite complicated, and the players are going to have to learn, as they go about recovery runs, moving inside to out, etc. So patience will be needed. And of course, they got caught once in this game because that's the way it's been going, So yeah, but no, overall positive signs, I would say.
Yeah, very much in keeping with some of the comments that Martin's kindly been highlighting for us. So, Jamie Lawler says biggest plus in Nancy's 5 games so far is we've found a role in relationship in which Katie and Maeda can flourish. Both Rodgers and O'Neill struggled to find this dynamic. There's a question from Balance. Somebody can't read that. Can Inamura play left but wing back? James, I'm going to come to you with that one after because Inamura is your guy. But before we do, Martin, I just wanted to get your thoughts because when I was at the game on Sunday, it was interesting what Alan was saying there about McCowan. And okay, he doesn't play left wing back, and I've seen the 20-minute Tims guys talk about this. I personally feel people are getting a little bit too hung up on positions and what the name of the position is that each person's playing. When you actually look at heat maps, when you look at the average position that each player tends to take up, a lot of them end up taking up similar positions that they would do in other systems. It's just that the jobs they're being asked to do when they're in and out of possession is slightly different to what they would have been asked to do in another system. Is that too simplistic a way of looking at it for you?
No, I think there's two different aspects of it, really, Laura. First of all, I agree with you. I think that I think of Maeda, and Maeda battering up and down that left wing isn't that different from what we saw under Ange, for example. But the other aspect of it as well is that I actually went to scout undercover for the Motherwell Dundee game with Motherwell, obviously game coming up on the 30th of December. And what struck me was the movement and the rotation in the Motherwell team. Now that took a little bit of time for their manager to get that together. Their fans were very concerned in the League Cup group stages, for example. But goodness me, it looks absolutely terrific. And even in a very early stage, it may actually have been Nancy's first game. I was quite struck by KT playing on the right-hand side for a period, so players are kind of moving around. Yang also in the Aberdeen game, the first goal came from Yang cutting in, and then he ran to the opposite wing to win the ball back before playing it to McCowan, who put it through to Maeda for Nygren's goal. So I think it's the two different aspects of it. I do agree. I think a lot of fans are very hung up on this maybe more traditional positioning. I don't think for many of these players it is that different from what they have been doing over the last few years if they've been with us that length of time. And I think anyway that we just need to get used to players rotating. I think it's terrific. It's Kenny Allen, a bit like the old Dutch systems, that we were watching in the 70s and things with the total football, players filling in. And I think that's the big problem at the moment. Is I heard a few people shouting at Scales, when we lost the goal. He was, you could say, at fault, I suppose, but I don't blame him for it because he thought the ball had been won. He's obviously under instructions to move up that left wing when we're in possession. And it just needs players to get used to, as the guys have been saying, filling in these positions, filling in the gaps. And we've had no time. This is the first week we've had, really, where we've not been playing midweek games. So I'm actually getting a bit more confident that once the manager's got some time on the grass with these guys, they'll start to really get it, and hopefully it'll tick over, as well as I'm sure we'll come to in a little bit, the recruitment side of things, which we desperately need.
Yeah, I've seen you get people asking about recruitment, and we'll certainly go into that in a little bit. James, that question that I brought up from one of the viewers before, Inamura, left wing back. I think the reason his name has come into things is because he was on the bench on Sunday, wasn't he? Which was for the first time in a while.
Yeah,
he kind of
we've seen them even in a squad for, I don't even know, months.
Yeah, so he's been brought out from out in the cold for some reason by Nancy, so I would suggest that he sees some role for him in the system. Is left wing back where you think he would be best deployed in this system, or can you see him being placed maybe even in a more central midfield role?
I think the premium for Nancy's system is flexibility. People that are able to do multiple roles in multiple positions, to what Martin was just saying, is because the movement is so dynamic, the interchanging is so dynamic, that players need to be able to do multiple functions within that different areas. So I think, a more interesting question as we move on to recruitment is, one could speculate that the head of football operations signed Inamura not for Brendan Rodgers, but for a future Wilfried Nancy managed Celtic, because he's so. And I'm saying that as an example of and how important it is on profile, meaning that the way Brendan Rodgers played, he was a square peg in a round hole. He's not really a left back. He can't really defend out wide like a true left back can, particularly at the European level against very fast, shifty wingers. He's not big enough and physical enough to play the left side of the center back in a back four, particularly in Scotland. So he's this kind of weird profile relative to how the manager played. So, he didn't get used other than one time at left back, and he looked really good because it was a game where he didn't really have to do any defending, and he wasn't lining up against a world class or even a decent level attacking right winger. I think he can suit easily the left center back of the back three, probably the left sided wing back, the way that Nancy's deploying it, and maybe even one of the pivot roles. More importantly, interacting and exchanging within those three roles. So he and Tierney, I think, are both kind of interchangeable in that regard. I would say Inamura more so like a midfielder type profile, and Tierney more of the bombing on winger. So they have the relative strengths and weaknesses. I think my big concern now is he may have already checked himself out. Inamura, and there's been rumors that he's lining up a loan to buy move back to Japan. There's been some reporting in Japan that might have even already been negotiated and or done. So that ship may have sailed. I can't say as I'd blame him. When the new place you arrive, the manager, basically the new manager that you're supposed to play for, basically undercuts your entire career at that club before you even start. Probably not a good place to start. And then reports of him being on loan, having a deal agreed at the end of the window in the summer, and that being kind of put on hold at the last second, as several other ones were reportedly. Maybe he just doesn't want to be at Celtic anymore, and I can't say as I blame him or so the idea that Nancy's going to come in and reclaim all of this and make him feel better about being at Celtic, all that stuff within 2 weeks, probably not realistic, even if he is the ideal fit.
Yeah, plenty of comments coming through about things like that, transfers in January and recruitment and Paul Tisdale, the elusive Paul Tisdale. We will get to that in a second. Martin, I'm going to come to you to pick one of those questions in a second, but I'll go to Alan first because there is one aspect to the Aberdeen game, and it does tie slightly into recruitment that I wanted to talk about before we move on to that conversation. The big weakness in the team at the moment is finishing, is putting away those chances. The big glaring error or the glaring thing that most football fans suggest you need in that situation is a striker. We are relying at the moment on Johnny Kenny and Yang and Maeda, neither of whom are what you would call prolific goal scorers. I don't know, Alan, were those chances, especially the ones that Kenny missed on Sunday, were they quite as much of a sitter as people were suggesting that they were? Where do you stand on the whole striker discussion and how desperate we are to get that sorted in January if we can?
Yeah, it's clear. I mean, I went a bit of back and forth about Yamada yesterday with a few folks. Listen, what does he start? Does he start one game? I don't even know if he started one game. I don't know how many minutes
he has started one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
if you add up all his
one
minutes, but it's probably, I don't know, maybe a couple of 100 minutes or something, maybe like that. So to be fair, I don't think we've really seen enough of him. I mean, I think Johnny Kenny's had a number of starts. Again, I've not gone back and checked, added them all up, but I think we've got a bit more of a handle on his game. I quite like Johnny Kenny's game outside the box. Actually, he presses reasonably well. He's got a surprising pace. He's quick over 2-3 yards, which is an issue in the box, but he's good when he gets going. And he covers the ground well when he breaks. Doesn't seem to have much of a creative passing game, unfortunately. Listen, he's a young lad, but whether he's good enough or not, I think Celtic would expect to have a better quality of forward than they have at the moment. Yamada's a bit of an unknown quantity. He had one really good season in Japan, 19 goals, where he was used in a role that suggested similar, not exactly the same, but similar at least to how Ange used as strikers. And I still think he may have utility and grow into that. I know he's 25, but inexperienced player by we've talked about this with Hatate. He came from college, which meant he didn't start playing pro till he was 21. So, he's relatively inexperienced for a 25-year-old. He may well have some utility, but I wouldn't put the pressure on him of being the number one striker. That probably wouldn't work, right? So you're really left with probably putting Maeda back there, who can do that job. And then you then back to the problem of, well, who do we put on the left-hand side of attack, given that we've lost Tanetki, Balakwisha, not that I would put him there anyway, etc. So definitely there's strengthening needed. There was strengthening needed anyway. There's been strengthening needed since the end of January this year, sorry. So it's repeated that over and over and over and over again. In terms of actually the best chance, to me, the worst miss was Engel's header. I mean, he was literally in front of the goal, 3-4 yards out, put it against the post. That was probably the biggest miss of the day. It wasn't necessarily one of Johnny Kenny's. So no, undoubtedly that's where we need strengthening. But as Nancy said today, he expects goals from all round the team. So it's something that everyone needs to kind of contribute to as well. It's not just on the strikers. But I think what's the other bit that's encouraging in terms of providing the environment for people to thrive, and especially that sort of penalty box, 6-yard box striker that we so loved, with Kyogo and to a lesser extent Giakoumakis, is, if you look at the numbers in terms of how are Celtic progressing the ball, how are they moving the ball into the box, the number of crosses, and this is crosses and defined by StatsBomb, is kind of going down, but the number of passes into the box is going up, and I think that's very important, because I think Nancy is, I'm in his camp on this, and always have been, is that can you pass the ball to somebody rather than thrash it across the goal? Which, don't get me wrong, sometimes that's a great thing to do, but if you can pass deliberately, as in to pick out somebody, that's probably going to have a better chance of success than putting an aerial ball kind of speculatively into the box and hoping that one of our diminutive players can get on the end of it. So the number of passes into the box is going up. So I think that's, again, is a signal in the data for how Nancy wants the team to play. And so we need players who've got that instinct over 1 or 2 yards just to get ahead, just to be ahead of the defender. And I don't see that in Johnny Kenny, I'm afraid. I think he can do a good job, but I just don't see that instinct in him. And so, I don't want to bury the poor lad, but it's obvious to anyone that Celtic needs better quality in that position.
Can I just interject real quick, Laura?
Mm-hmm.
So, to live up with our brand, I got to throw some numbers out here. So in the 3 league games, Johnny Kenny has 1.94 in XG. Okay. Even Johnny Kenny on a bad day is going to convert some of that to something on goal. It may not be the best finishes. It may not, actually score. His post-shot XG is 0.13. So it's just a crazy degree of being ineffectual that's beyond him being a League of Ireland striker, or whatever critical way that you want to characterize his level. It's just a really bad 3 games for anybody. And these things can happen. That's the definition of what Al and I rail on and on about variance, is that any player that gets that, and these were not in general speculative chances. The vast majority of these were, high quality chances. So to miss that level of quality chance sequentially over a 3-game stretch is just unusual. And Nancy referenced this in his press conference this week about one of them about he doesn't believe in luck, but he sure has seemed to have had a lot of it, but bad luck. And this is an example of it. It's just kind of wacky stuff. Wacky stuff happens sequentially, and I feel so bad for Kenny because of that. I mean, it's just so. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. And I don't think it's an accurate representation of what his true talent level is, even if one thinks that he is somebody that we need to upgrade over. So I suspect, he's due, Martin. If he gets a chance here, I feel confident he'll put 1 or even 2 or even 3 would be a glorious hat trick for Kenny.
Well, I mean,
it's just such a wacky level. It's not going to persist.
Sorry, James. I mean, again, coming back to one of our topics of the season around these kind of XG models and variants and so forth, wrapping all that around, Johnny Kenny's header in the semi-final at Hampden from outside the width of the post from a corner is an incredibly low XG, which he scored, versus the chances that he got. So this is just what can happen, and over a small sample, But again, you've got to look at the wider picture. You've got to look at the build-up play, the wider contribution that he's making. And as I say, the profile that I described of what a striker should look like in this system to be optimal, which is very similar to Pete Kyogo, let's be honest. And I'm not advocating that we go and rescue Kyogo from his Birmingham hell. I'm not saying that. But that is very similar.
I really hope not, Alan.
Style of striker that I think we're going to need. And I'm afraid I don't see much evidence for all Johnny Kenny's strengths and weaknesses, I don't think he's that kind of striker.
Yeah. The Johnny Kenny thing, the fact he scored as many goals, what was it, 4 goals in 3 games just recently, and then nothing. I don't know whether I'm more surprised by the goals that he scored or the fact that he isn't scoring, but either way, the guy just looks a little bit short in confidence, and I'm sure once those start going in, things will change. Martin, I'll hand over to you to maybe ask the guys a couple of questions from the viewers about especially the recruitment side of things and Paul Tisdale and where we're heading in January for that one.
Absolutely, lots of them. One thing just before that, what I would say about Kenny is, to be fair, the amount of running that the guy's been doing and the role he's been playing in the team from that point of view, certainly no lack of effort. And hopefully, as you guys were saying there, hopefully he'll get the run of the ball and can make a big difference to a striker, of course. I know you don't like talk of confidence, James, but, I think could make a wee difference for that young man. But looking at there's been pretty much an avalanche of questions that we'll go into in a moment about Paul Tisdale and about recruitment. But I thought maybe a little segue into that was got a question from Snick, who mentioned about how the midfield lost the ball a lot less, perhaps without Hatate in the team. And he felt maybe that was a bonus for the type of intricate passing plays that the team were playing. So, guys, wondered what your thoughts were on Hatate in the Nancy system, and maybe broadening that out a little bit. Mentioned the forwards, which is glaring, but what about the middle of the park, because could we be recruiting a bit better there in any sense?
I'll go quick. I think that Hatate is one of the things that and this is more qualitative, anecdotal, is I don't think he's a very good quick decision maker. Meaning when I say that relative to like spatial intelligence, and this is why I've never really liked him as an advanced 10 kind of around the box, which is you just see so many times when you go, what the hell was he looking at? Like, how did he decide that was a good pass to play relative to where the guys are kind of physically? And this wasn't really a short distance one, but I highlighted it on the Extra Time show last week about Gogic basically reading his eyes and intercepting a ball that, almost like a free safety in the NFL would with a quarterback, just read his eyes, saw where the pass was going and jumped it and stole the pass that was intended for Forrest. So I just don't know. I think at times he's just going to be a streaky player because of that issue. And I don't know if his value as a deep lying playmaker makes up for these other issues. I don't know if he's injured. I don't think that was even referenced in the press conference that was recorded earlier today, or at least released earlier today with Nancy. So I don't know what the situation there is, but to kind of bring it together, I think midfield continues. I've been railing on for 3 seasons now, continues to be a dire need of upgrade. I don't think Engels is kind of tailor-made for this system either. So I'd like to see somebody put next to McGregor because I think this does suit McGregor a lot. I think, but he needs somebody very athletic and somebody who's going to be really good at those rotations. That's also good on the ball. Good luck. Again, this is the issue. My guess is he probably won't be 6'2" in order for us to afford him, but somebody that can help him a little bit more in that part of the pitch. And I don't think it's Hatate, unfortunately.
I bet I was just thinking, watching it the weekend, I bet Callum McGregor wishes he was 4 or 5 years younger playing in this system. He would be amazing because he would be able to do everything. And he would be able to get contribute more in the attacking sense, particularly. I mean, as regards Hatate, I think he would have been actually perfect for the game on the weekend against Aberdeen, because of all the teams that we've played so far, this was the first time that we've played a team that didn't sort of press balls to the wall against us. They were very passive, and Hatate needs time. I think James articulated it very well. I think I've been trying to say that and not found the right words over the last few years. I think there's a slightly secondary element to it, which is that not only does he, I think he needs more time. He's also out of time when you're trying to play quick football. He operates in his own time zone. He's definitely wired differently in that sense of he's not in the same tempo a lot of the time with his teammates, and he does slow the game down a lot when he receives the ball, which can be a good thing. It can be a good thing. But because Aberdeen were so passive in that game, I think he would have actually flourished in that match at the weekend there specifically. But in the 4 games previously, when teams were pressing aggressively, he's not so effective. And just a quick word on Aberdeen, because for those of you that are joining live that maybe you haven't joined us before, we do talk about the opposition a lot. This is a Celtic podcast. We play other teams, so we like to talk about them because it's interesting, rather than just going round and around the same old topics on Celtic. With Aberdeen, I do despair, actually. I think they've got such a talented group of players, and they so lack personality. I'm borrowing this word from Wilfried Nancy now. He talks about personality, which I think when you're not English, it's a code for having the sort of... We'd use different words, I think. We'd use words like, gets the club and like gets stuck in and gives 100% and all this sort of thing. All that. But that team so lacks personality, it so lacks identity. What are they trying to do? What is that team trying to do? He's got so many talented players that seem to be drifting, and they're 6th in the league. I just don't see where they're going. So sorry, Aberdeen fans. That's just a little aside from me. You probably don't care what I think about that, but I think Aberdeen is my main point, and this comes back to what we said at the beginning, is that in context of this game, yes, Celtic played really well. Yes, it was great to see the team and Nancy's particularly get rewards. But Aberdeen were a nice opponent to play in that sense. Not only did they get a man sent off, and Nancy made a very good point. We provoked that, he said. We provoked that. So by pressing, by being on the front foot, we caused that sending off. And I think, that's positive variance, but it's also something that Celtic have kind of forced. So I think that's credit, and he's right to point that out. But in the main, versus Roma's incredibly well organised man-to-man pressing, this was completely the opposite. It was so passive. It was so, and as I say, I just think they've got such talent. But you saw it on the ball in 2 or 3 moments. There's one in the first half, and the goal actually, where the interchange. Stuart Armstrong was in the middle of all of it. He's still a talented player, and he was linking the play together with Oshish, especially, and it really kind of, you could see, gosh, they've got something here. If only Talene knew what to do with them. So it was a nice opponent, is what I'm saying. And that's not to piss on cornflakes, but context is always important.
No, Alan, it's hugely important, and it was something I wanted to make sure we brought up, because to look at our prior games and then to come up with that game plan against us took some doing. I mean,
yeah, it was terrible.
That's why we were, and we gave a lot of credit to him coming out of the cup final, which was because he had seen completely incapable of coming up with a coherent game strategy, not only against us, but just generally in a large part of last season. So we did for the cup final, but this was the antithesis of this. Like, I don't even know what they were trying to do. And most of what they seemed to maybe be trying to do was the opposite of what I would do if I was in his shoes, in trying to, get some joy against how Celtic's playing right now and our relative weaknesses. So yeah, I as positive as I still am on kind of generally where we're heading, if Nancy is given time and some upgrades on the player front, it's really easy to get too excited about this game because of that. It's how big of a part of the attribution goes to Aberdeen being really catastrophically bad in the way that they were set up, I think.
Okay, and just to kind of segue a little bit as well, you were talking about some of the Aberdeen players there, that one would perhaps think might be doing better in a different system. James McMullen asked, are there any opposition players in Scotland that would work well in Nancy's setup? And if so, who should we consider in the January window?
Yeah.
Cammy Devlin springs to
Cammy
mind.
Devlin.
James Street.
Yeah.
I know you're a huge fan.
Who was the kid? I say kid. Was his name Justy? The guy who played at Motherwell. He seemed to be the kind of.
Just New Zealand's.
Yeah. Again, I haven't looked at him.
He was outstanding against Motherwell the other week. Against Dundee last week. Yeah.
Yeah, but just seeing like he seems like one of these players that, with what Askew's asking them to do, he's able to move around into different locations of the pitch. And he's got good control and technique. I mean, he's one that when I saw him, I was like, boy, this would be good
he's a player
in Nancy's system. Yeah. So that's the first one that jumps out at me. I don't know if you have any, Alan, to leap out.
I'm trying to rack my brains. I mean, it doesn't matter who I think about. All I've got in the front of my mind is Lauren Shankland, because he's brilliant over a couple of yards. I mean, he would be sniffing out those goals. No problem at all. And, he was free in the summer. I mean, God, what the hell are we playing at? Crikey.
Yeah, there's been a few Hearts players mentioned. I think the chances of us getting a deal done for any of them, I like the idea, get them weakened, but I don't
that's
think
the thing. This is why Tony Bloom wouldn't sign a Hearts player for Celtic, because we play a different style. Like it's totally us kind of tongue in cheek having fun with Cammy Devlin doesn't take away from the fact he's having an incredible season at Hearts. Playing the way that they need him to play in his system, that would not carry over playing in defensive midfield against.
Just to be clear, James, does that mean Cammy Devlin is a star of Derek Ball? Is that what we call it, Del Ball?
He is. Yeah, he's been one of their best players by some distance, I think.
Yeah. Just so you guys are aware, a couple of other names been mentioned there. We've got David Watson coming up. An interesting shout, not a bad shout, and another one of your heroes. You guess who? The star of the cup final, James
Gogic.
Indeed, so.
Yeah, I don't think he's at the level that we would need. Directionally, I like the idea of him as the center of the back three.
Although purely aesthetically, and I mean this purely aesthetically, he is a Rangers player. That's all I'm going to say on the matter.
I think that's libel.
Well, do we have any on recruitment? We should get in.
Well, yes. I was just about to say there, because that kind of takes us on. There's again been an awful lot there about Paul Tisdale, about him being on holiday at the moment. How confident we are that recruitment will be dealt with in this January window to any extent that will be beneficial for us, and also the possibility of perhaps should we concentrate on the loan market, because maybe that will be easier to get players of a decent quality in at that particular point. So I suppose, Alan, if we come to you first, as I say, so we're talking loan market, maybe go for Tisdale first in his role at Celtic, and also him not actually being there. Maybe he's just got the business done already and he thinks that's a job well done, I can go on holiday now. One can hope.
Well, the head of scouting has left, and as far as I'm aware, hasn't been replaced. So we're probably understaffed, I would guess. That's one thing to think about. The second thing is, being realistic about, what's going to make a difference between the end of January and the end of the season. So Celtic have, whatever you might think about their recruitment over the last 10, 15 years, they've been fairly consistent in how they go about it. And, they do have a model, such as it is, of trying to go for younger players and, developing them, being the major idea. We don't often buy players that are 26, 27, 28. It's not really the model. So, but again, if we bring in some 20, 19, 20, 21-year-olds in January, what realistically are they going to contribute to the team in terms of, the time it takes them to settle in, environment, weather, country, food, blah, 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 league, etc. Probably not a huge amount now. They might be exceptional, like Matt O'Reilly, and immediately hit the ground running and immediately contribute, but then, that would be quite rare, I would suggest. So I suspect, I don't know, and I'll have to say that from my end, there is a complete absence of chatter of any transfer business at all. So just putting that out there for what it's worth. Not saying I'm in the know. I'm just saying that, the characteristic is a lack of chatter at the moment about anything. Is that I suspect we'll probably try and get, again, some sort of in strategy type younger players lined up. And we may be, because of the state of the squad and the tactical need to improve certain positions now, I think we probably will end up using the loan market and get a couple of players in who are maybe, not in the picture at a English Premier League side, for example, where there'll be, a low risk as far as, culture and weather and blah, 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 style of football, who maybe got points to prove, etc., etc. The other dynamic is players who are not playing, who are as far as they're concerned, in line for a World Cup place. They'll be desperate to show their worth before the end of the beginning of the summer. That would be a fertile area to look at for some of the key positions that we need strengthening. And I think, to be honest with you, such is the relative lack of equality in the squad, and such are the long-term nature of the injuries to key players. I think we have to be very realistic about the prospects of Alistair Johnson and Jota, particularly, being able to come back and contribute and play every week and get back to their levels in a meaningful way that's going to positively impact the team between now and the end of beginning of May. You've got to be very realistic about that. I wouldn't hang my little hat on that. I really wouldn't. These are long-term injuries, and so there might be some significant loan market activity for that reason, and that might be disappointing, but it's probably pragmatic, and it probably is sensible given it's a World Cup year, and given that there'll be players out there that may not previously have wanted to come to Celtic necessarily, but would do if it meant playing every week and getting a World Cup under the belt.
James, I just wondered as well, because this had also come up, and I thought it was an interesting point. It came up about Navroki, and looking at our players that are out on loan. Do you think there's any scope for Nancy, given his relationship with Tisdale, to maybe look at bringing anyone back? Maybe they're, to your earlier point, they're more suitable for Nancy's style of play than they may have been for Brendan's.
It's possible. I think the challenge comes down to specific profiles. So, for example, Welsh and Navratsky may have more of the passing that one would be looking for, but this goes back to understanding how he's run his system in the past, which is people will automatically think kind of orthodox back three. They could play maybe outside right. That's not how he plays, right? That's why he's got fullbacks there. So Welsh and Navratsky are not fullback adjacent center backs. So that leads the question: are they fast enough to play that center back position? Like why Trusty suits? And you see how quickly, Nancy learned and adjusted. Where he came in the first game, it was Scales in the middle, Trusty on the right side, and then he pretty quickly said, I figured it out that. I think reasonably so, that Trusty had to be in the middle because of this pace issue. So I'm not sure. I don't see anyone that's out that reasonably could come back. Again, theoretically, he's an abstraction at this point, and unfortunately, it sounds like he's had a career-ending condition in his lower legs in Holm. He seemed to have the ball-playing ability as a midfielder that I was optimistic about, but again, for whatever reasons, his career was already stagnating, and he had this chronic calf issue. I wanted to circle back to the window, though, to set expectations. Why loans may end up being a material part of this is our wage bill last season was just under £75 million. Okay. This is a Europa League season. We can all rightfully complain that we self-sabotage to turn it into a Europa League season, but with not another penny campaign, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that revenues will be sub 110 million this season for the fiscal year ending in June. It could be a fair bit lower than that. Wouldn't be surprising. When you look at the number that's going to be applicable to FSR. So you are right there. Now that's not first team wage bill at that 75. That's everybody, including, the Celtic store staff and everything. But I don't think there's as much room if you're running things like Dermot Desmond likes to run them sustainably, which again, we laud that. I don't think there's a lot of room, and there's a lot of dead weight on the wage bill with injured players. Carter Vickers, AJ, Jota, these are all high earners on a relative basis that we're not getting any production out of. That's why we're kind of, stuck with this squad problem, at least to a material degree, but they're still getting paid. They're still part of the wage bill, unless there's some kind of insurance we don't know about. So I don't think there's a huge amount of, unless we're getting rid of, because
absolutely
Kuhn wasn't on a big wage coming out of where he was coming out of. I'd be shocked anyway. Part of why he probably really wanted and was agitating for a move. So I don't think that we've exited a lot of players that were on big wages where we all of a sudden have this, a large amount of room within the budget to go sign a lot of upside. So even if it's one striker that's, on 30 grand a week, like that might be it from a wage bill perspective, the way that they run the club. So again, I think with the risk aversion on the financial side, on a budget basis, loans kind of seem like the obvious way to kind of patch this hole.
Yeah. And I suppose, Laura, I know you've got a lot of contacts with Columbus Crew. I think he'll raid the NLS market.
I think any chance of us getting a sale from Columbus Crew, I have markedly reduced the chances of.
Personally.
So sorry, Martin, just on that point, sorry to... Yep. I know you were being... I
was putting it out there, just wondering if somebody was going to tap it in.
So to go back to, again, to be on brand and to be dull and earnest about it, is that they're in their shutdown, they're in their post-season. Yes. So anybody that we sign who's at an MLS club effectively hasn't even started pre-season yet. So how much are they going to contribute to Celtic's first team in the next few months? Very little, I'd suggest. So again, it's another factor that you have to think about realistically. So, again, I agree with James. I think, as much as we might want, and also, even if we were to buy players, who are we going to sell to raise funds in that sense? Who are the marketable assets at the moment?
One would suggest there is a Saudi prince looking to line our pockets for one Callum McGregor. Whether that will come to fruition or not, I don't know.
I mean, the one player so far, I think who's, if you want to sort of categorize it as nose put out of joint, was probably Liam Scales. I mean, he's the one player who, arguably the most consistent player for Celtic this season, and the one seeming potential victim, not because of the way he's been playing, I would suggest, more because of the system and Nancy. And this is good for Celtic. This is good for Celtic. Not good for Liam Scales, but good for Celtic. We have a manager who's very clear about the profile of the players he wants in these positions, and he's going to put the best fit of player into those positions. This is exactly what we've always wanted. And unfortunately for Liam Scales, he's a bit of a victim of that until Trustee's hamstrings inevitably twine.
Yeah, quite. It's going to be the January transfer window. I'm trying not to get myself too hyped up for, because we've been around the houses long enough to know that we're probably setting ourselves up for disappointment if we're thinking anything major is going to happen in that time. The only time I can remember it happening was under Ange, and I don't foresee the same sort of drastic changes, but we live in hope. Just before we go, we'll do a little bit of a preview of Motherwell, who is our Livingston. Livingston, who is our next match. James, the thing that always worries me about Livingston, and it's a cliche to say so, is that you're always up against a big team who are just looking to shut you out, and they are incredibly difficult to break down. What I saw against Aberdeen, if we can get a decent amount of the ball, maybe there's a way for us to play around that block and get to the byline and cut the ball back and do all that kind of stuff. Is that the approach you think Nancy's going to take? Is he going to switch it up at all, or am I on a hiding to nothing by suggesting that he might do that?
Laura, this is not your mother's Livingston. They are not playing the way that they had historically. They didn't do that. That's not how they got back out of the championship and earned promotion. So maybe Martindale shifts because of a matchup situation here. But the way they've been playing so far this season, they are one of the most aggressive pressing teams. They will go a lot of man-to-man. So actually, from a stylistic perspective, they are a much more annoying matchup than what Aberdeen displayed, for example. I'm not talking about quality in any way, but style-wise, they are directionally towards Roma. And that's how they've been playing. I've been skeptical that they've been going to be able to make that work within the context of the league. I don't think they're doing it as well, for example, as Motherwell is. That Motherwell's just being brilliant at it so far. But they're kind of like what St. Johnston was trying to do last season. So maybe be a little bit more progressive on the ball, build out from the back, press and counter press very aggressively. But as we know, if the players struggle in order to convert those chances into goals, which this has been Motherwell's challenge, they're playing a lot of great football. It's in that final third, even when they counter press and turn the opposition over, turning that into a quality chance and scoring it. That's, where that little bit of quality at the end there really matters. So I think Livingston is suffering from that similar situation, but on that pitch, I haven't seen what the weather forecast is. Not that it matters to look at the weather forecast in Livingston 4 days out or whatever it is, 5 days out, because it could change so much. But this absolutely has the potential to be more of one of these games where the ball's flying around, chaotic on that pitch, and them being a lot more front-footed and pressuring our players, which is going to be an interesting stress test with a week of training. So I'm not at all trying to big up Livingston here. That they're not a good team. They've been performing poorly overall, but at home and with the relative issues of where we're at right now, I think they will stress test us in certain ways. And I think it's actually a nice bridge game to get us to Motherwell, because if we can't kind of show some of the progress that we need to in the second half, for example, we've been crumbling a little bit under pressure when St. Mirren shifted and Dundee United shifted tactics, kind of get up in our, as we Americans say, up in your grill, right? Get up in our grill a little bit and get on us in that more close man-to-man marking. This will be a good test. And I think, we need to show material progress against this level of an opponent. But I could definitely see some queasy moments as part of that.
Yeah, I suppose I'll leave it to you for final thoughts on this one then, Alan, for the game. I don't know. I'm a little bit encouraged to hear what James is saying about the slight change in style, if only because it means that we're not going to have this absolute barrier to break down. What side of it do you come down on? Is it something that will suit us more to play against, or as James says, is there going to be a lot of stress tests that we're going to be put under to potentially cause us issues?
And there will be, and there always is there, environmental factors not being the least of it. And again, I think, odd as it is to say in professional sport, the weather will have a bit of an impact in that sense. And actually, for as much as Livingston are trying to be more progressive and have shifted quite dramatically in underlying playing style under Martindale this season, they still are capable of playing more traditional Livy ball. They still will do that, and possibly might do that against Celtic at the weekend there. So that I think we need to prepare for that. And I normally do a preview of the opposition. I will do that. I'll do it in written form. For those who are watching who aren't subscribers, usually do a tactical preview of the opposition before the game, and as I say, I'll get that up on the site before the weekend. And so my last point really will be: this is the first time that we've seen or will have experienced Wilfried Nancy having a full week before the next game, and I think that could be quite important, because the bigger variability, we've talked about variance, we've talked about the variance that Livingston introduced, and that's really where they're traditionally been their strength. They managed to create variability and disrupt better resource teams. That's their super strength. But actually, the bigger variance at the moment is in Celtic and in Celtic's performances. And with a full week of preparation, that will change the dynamic for Celtic, hopefully for the positive, as we go into that week. So I'm really excited about this game. Really excited about to see what a week on the training field has done in terms of those glimpses, and more than glimpses, against Aberdeen. There's some of the relationships that he talked about when he joined that we're seeing on the left, especially flourishing and improving in time for the next game. That's what I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, Martin, any thoughts yourself on the Livingston game? Have you managed to snag a ticket out to the game in West Lothian?
Not as yet. It's always a last minute job with these sort of things. But I found it really interesting what James was saying, and Alan's kind of touched on it a little bit there, because James is absolutely correct, of course, in terms of the difference in the style of play with Livingston. However, I watched them play against St Mirren, and they took to shelling the ball. St Mirren absolutely battered them, but they were playing much longer. They had the big guys up front, etc. And it made me wonder, actually, as we're going to play them. They've seen St Mirren, they've seen Dundee United. I suspect that we could be in for defenders with sore necks, trying to head the ball away if they get the opportunities. So there's an element of that coming in. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they reverted back to that, especially bottom of the league. The last victory, I think, was against Allen's Falkirk. What was it, 9th of August, something like that? They beat Falkirk, the only victory they've had this season. They've had a few tight games, of course. Couple of, I think the Rangers scored late on at Livy, also at Ibrox. There was a baffling decision, a handball decision that wasn't given for Livingston as well. They've had tight games with Hearts, so I don't think they're mugs. However, I would be expecting Celtic to go there and win. I agree with Alan. If Celtic turn up and play anything remotely like the style that we did, have a bit more, whether it be good fortune or more precise finishing, I would expect us to come away comfortably. But then again, when has that ever happened?
Indeed. I'm seeing a few really nice comments coming through, people thanking us for providing the content throughout 2026. I'm sure I speak on behalf of Martin and myself when I say the majority of the stuff that you guys see is all the result of James and Alan. And so from us, thank you very much for having us on the platform. To everybody watching and listening, we love providing this content for you. James and Alan, as I said, love getting geeky with our spreadsheets and getting into all the nitty gritty of the numbers. And I can't speak for Martin on this one, but I certainly learn a lot from for being part of the podcast and listening to that. So I'll leave it to James and Alan to sign off, because I think that's only the appropriate way to do it before Christmas.
No, it's been a for the Huddle breakdown ecosphere, it's been a great year. We're a little over a year into it, and just want to thank everyone that's been along for the ride. For those who aren't, we have our own little community we've built. If you're like to nerd out a little bit and get out of some of the zaniness that takes place on social media, that kind of
stuff. If they haven't got the Christmas presents in, James, there's still subscriptions available, It's a handy stocking filler.
Yeah, if you're a loser like me and you need a last minute gift for somebody, you procrastinate. But no, just really thank you to the audience and everybody that interacts with us. It's been a great year. And we look forward to next year, because it's this, as we talked about, endlessly heading into the season. It's exceeding expectations as far as the craziness, as crazy as we thought it might be. So thanks again, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.